Kalen DeBoer said more additions were coming. Will we see him today?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Lars. So today it's the last day of the early signing period. So we're going to keep the whole recruiting theme going here, as we love to do here on Locked On Huskies. So one of the things that we noticed, we're going to talk a lot about Kalen DeBoer's press conference that we were at on Wednesday afternoon. But one thing that he said right off the bat is he was expecting as many as 5 additions before the early signing period closes, as the Everydayers are listening to this on Friday night. So the question is, outside of 4-star wide receiver Aaron Butler, who Kalen DeBoer was very clear that was one of their top targets without saying anything, that violate any NCAA rules, that was one of their top targets. So what other late additions could we be expecting outside of the 2 unsigned commitments, which are, unless things have changed between, when this is recorded and when the Everydayers are listening to this, which are transfer lineman, defensive lineman BJ Green and 4-star defensive lineman Dominic Kirks.
Yeah, that's why that number was kind of interesting to me when DeBoer said 5. I was like, okay, well, I got 3 for you. Maybe 4. So the one that comes to mind is, what do they do at tight end, right? Jack Betting.
Yeah.
Right. Jack Betting announced he's going to Michigan State. So, and I believe they also offered former Fresno State tight end Trey Watson in the past couple of days. So maybe that's a sign where Ben doesn't want to necessarily know what he's going to do right away, and maybe they want to get somebody in the mid-year. But the other point of it is they don't necessarily have to have these decisions done right now. So the way DeBoer also kind of worded it wasn't his fault, but it was, oh wait, are you getting these guys before Friday, or are you getting them before or at the next national signing day, right, in February, the first weekend in February, week in February, right?
So or it's around there.
Right, where it's like, okay, like you can draw this out a little bit more. I believe, wasn't there a report out that Aaron Butler was going to delay is he still enrolling in January, or is he going to delay that to March?
There was some mixed messaging there where ESPN was saying he might push to February, while 247 was saying he could sign on by Friday. So some mixed messaging. We'll see. Either like both are very believable and very understandable, and with the position that he's in. So that one's just kind of a wait and see.
And I think the whole point of it, again, not to get Kalen DeBoer in trouble at all, but just to pick up where he left off, where the reason why it sounds so much like Aaron Butler will end up at Washington is because, okay, well, if he's going to Arizona, you can just go to Arizona, right? You just put pen to paper there, cast the check, do whatever you need to do. But the fact that Washington doesn't necessarily at this moment publicly know which receivers are going to declare. I mean, again, we know Rome's gone, right? That's the safest bet. But the question is, do Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan both follow him out the door to where you open up that third spot? Now, again, we have the other report from, I believe, 247 about a couple of weeks ago where he said, well, I could get a defensive scholarship. But then it's like, well, so is Kalen DeBoer going to talk about you as a cornerback, and then you'll somehow end up just flipping to wide receiver in spring camp? Like, to me, that it more or less, I think, and that gives more credence to, I believe, I wouldn't be surprised if he waited until February to sign, because that way he would know, hey, where are maybe some other schools have some surprise guys declare, right? And others, and they say, hey, maybe we want to come back in, right? And or, there's other schools that can kind of pop up late where it's like, hey, we didn't really realize we were going to have an opportunity at a 4-star receiver. Let's go, Florida State, right? If you're losing Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, why not, hey, if Aaron Butler's still available, why not try and see if you can get him on an official, right? Like, and he's got a whole month in January to figure that out. So there's a few possibilities, but obviously I can totally see Aaron Butler ending up at Washington. It's just a matter of, does he bet that, or kind of get some unofficial confirmation that, hey, all 3 guys are going, but they're not going to announce until after the bowl games, but you'll be good to go, just sign, and then we'll figure out when to enroll you, right? Because now you have to deal with scholarships. If you're playing into January, do those scholarships count? Like, can you have both guys on the team? Do you have to delay his enrollment for 2 weeks until those guys declare? All those sorts of things. So it's really more of a technicality. Yeah, it's really more of a logistics issue than Aaron and his family not knowing where they want to go. I think it's almost clear where they know where they want to go, but in order to go there, it has to be done properly, and that takes logistical struggles.
So just to add on there a little bit, because there are two things that seem to be at play here. One thing that we've talked about is Jalen McMillan's injury, which made things a little bit harder on him in terms of wanting to declare for the NFL draft this year, because that feels like it's very clear from some things that he said and from some things that both you and I have heard, where it felt like he wanted to declare for the draft this year, and sustaining that knee sprain that kept him out for almost 2 months made that a little bit harder, where now he doesn't necessarily have 2 really good years of tape to put on to show the NFL. And so a really strong performance here in the Sugar Bowl and then a potential national championship would definitely help his stock. And I'm sure that might sway his decision one way over the other. So that definitely is something to play out here. But the other thing is just kind of taking it back a little bit to what Kalen DeBoer said in his press conference was, we have 2 wide, word for word, we have 2 wide receivers right now. So it seems very obvious that they're trying to add a third at in any way they possibly can. So it's just a matter of how are they going to make that work. You talked about potentially moving around a defensive scholarship where maybe that comes from maybe we say Asa Turner decides not to come back next season, or all of a sudden, oh yeah, that would have been a redshirt scholarship that we would have to use. Now we don't have to worry about that. All right, let's just allocate that to the offensive side for now. Then after Cameron Fabikilanen graduates this year, figure that out in a different way. We're just kind of spitballing here because the way scholarships work at the college level, I've got.
I was going to say this day and age, we got contracts and scholarships almost being the same thing at this point.
That's fair. But the way scholarships work can be a little bit confusing at times. So that kind of feels like the biggest reason that Aaron Butler may not have officially announced a commitment to Washington yet. Let's just say that because that's probably the best way to put it. Yeah. Like
the Drewski,
Hey, let's be real about that. But then, so without kind of going into too much detail on either of the unsigned commitments, because you and I have heard things behind the scenes that aren't necessarily, going to be just come to light just yet. It's nothing bad. It's nothing bad. It's just, those are private details that will be worked out behind the scenes. And, we'll just kind of see what happens. Is the best way to put it. But you talked about tight end. Let's talk about that last potential addition really quickly, because it feels like it could be a running back. But like you just said, with Anthony Woods committing to Utah, and then just some of the other pieces that we've seen, that one might be delayed a little bit longer, because Kalen DeBoer said there's a bit of a log jam at the position. But we'll see what happens in this late January signing period where maybe somebody else decides to enter the portal.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a great question that was asked of DeBoer about the running backs. That was a great question.
Somebody pretty cool asked that question.
I wouldn't go that far, but
all right. Hey, I'm sure
pulling back the curtain, I was the one that asked the question. But the reason why I asked the question was because we've been pretty adamant that they like Jason Brown, but because of the log jam that we had cited months prior, probably would be more likely that Brown would go elsewhere and then potentially portal back to Washington a couple of years from now if things don't work out. That's kind of how the relationship had been evolving with Washington. Obviously, I had the video where Lee Marks and Jason Brown walked off the field after the Oregon game, and it's like, okay, hey, obviously there's some relationship. There's a relationship that exists, right? It's not like Washington is saying, hey, no, we don't want you. Just, we're completely ignoring you. Because to another question that was asked, I believe by Mike Farrell, where you didn't sign any in-state kids this year. Like, that used to be a thing where, hey, we're going to build a fence around the state. And it's like, well, if you can get the better prospect in your eyes, you would be doing the program a disservice to not take that better player, right? Because it's not even fair to the kids that are in the state of Washington where, hey, I guess we'll just take you because you're an in-state kid. So that way we can say, hey, every year for the last 20 years, we've at least taken one in-state kid a year. It's like, okay, if you're continuing a 20-year record with 1, 1, 2, 1, it's like, how about like 4, 5, 7, 3, at least like make it a multitude of guys. So bringing this full circle, Jacobius Marks went to USC. Anthony Woods went to Utah, as you mentioned. There hasn't really been any new running back offers that have been in the portal that we have seen. And I think we'll get a chance to talk to the coaches on Saturday. And that might be one of the questions to ask to Lee Marks is, how has Sam Adams improved this season to where obviously he's gotten on the field? Is he a guy that you can maybe depend on? And potentially coming into the season, you would have thought, hey, that's a spot that might open up, right? Richard Newton graduates, as Kalen DeBoer mentioned. But that position, you have Will Nixon, Daniel Ngata, potentially Dylan Johnson and Cameron Davis both coming back next season. So there's so many guys and upperclassmen guys who are going to get playing time. And then you have Tybo Rogers, who you've been bringing along this season. So do we really need another guy? I mean, maybe if a scholarship opens up for whatever reason at that running back position over the next month and a half, so be it. But, that has to come to fruition first.
No, you're absolutely right there. So we're going to move on because we've got so many other things to talk about. And because Kalen DeBoer, like being able to talk about recruits for the first time, just publicly it's always a very interesting time. So we're going to talk about some takeaways from his press conference, but we got to get some shout outs in here first. And we're going to send a message to our friends over at Game Time, because if you need a last second holiday gift, like, if anybody in my family is listening, the Red Sox opened the season 2024 here in Seattle against the Mariners. So, just throwing that out there for any member of my family that might be listening. That'd be great. And Game Time is a great place to buy those tickets, because you shouldn't be stressed out when you're having to buy tickets to your next big event. And with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Some of the coolest things about Game Time is it's so easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area, and you get lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, a job loss protection, all kind of protections to make sure that you are getting the best deal available no matter when. Game Time is obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. You can find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. With zone deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And whenever we talk about recruiting, we also got to send a message to our good friends over at LinkedIn, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows the small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, I'm winded. Now it's time to talk about Kalen DeBoer's press conference. Lars, what was your biggest takeaway from the press conference? Because I talked a little bit about Rachimana Bulabulavu on yesterday's show on our super fun power hour that we did. I'm probably going to do a little bit more of that, but what was your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, there was a couple of things. One, kind of tying into your point about Bulabulavu, the fact that, there's always been questions like, hey, does Kalen DeBoer know the value of recruiting, right? I'm not saying we have those questions. I'm saying hey, sure, a coach coming from a, G5 level who hadn't been a Power 5 coach, does he know how to recruit to this level? It's been very clear he has, but even more so now with Courtney Morgan getting promoted to general manager and kind of what all that position entails. Kalen DeBoer clearly knows how the value of recruiting, and with the move to the Big Ten, as he mentioned in his press conference on Wednesday, where he said, these are the bodies, and we talked about it, right? These are the type of bodies along the defensive line that we need to get. It's like, yes, if I'm a fan of Washington, it's like that's what I need to hear, right? Now I can look at them like, oh well, they're not 5 stars, there's a couple of 4 stars. It's like, okay, but I think Kalen DeBoer and the staff have proven they can take guys that are under the radar. I mean, look at Denzel Boston, right? He was a 3-star out of Emerald Ridge that Jamarcus Shepard had no idea about. And he's like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to take this guy. I like his skill. We'll figure it out, right? I have confidence in my ability as a coach to get the most out of this guy who has the perfect frame to coach up as a receiver. There's a number of positions you can go to, right? I mean, the development that Scott Huff has done with Troy Furtado, there's a number of guys. So when you start looking at a David Boyajian, right? Same sort of kind of principle. Like, hey, these are the guys we need on the line. Pocky, obviously established starter, well-documented 4-star, all that stuff. But getting a guy like Boyajian is almost like getting Keona Wilhite, right? It's like you can see that you can see the high upside, you can see the coachability, and classic Kalen DeBoer sense, but he doesn't go down the Chris Peterson road. They're good kids, right? There's no question marks in this class. There's no like, I don't know, that guy's kind of a diva, this and that, and it's like, and there's really none of that in this class. Again, certain people will always think certain ways of people, but for the most part, you just look at this class and it's like, yeah, the top to bottom, it's like good kids that are probably going to be in the program. And one thing that I also talked about recently that Kalen DeBoer didn't mention but kind of hinted at was none of these guys seem like high portal probability guys, right? Even with Dominic Kirk still waiting to sign and all that, I think that you could just as much say that, hey, what about maybe there's a distance factor, right? Maybe the parents want to just, know that they're going to be able to see their son often, right? Things like that. How easy is it for the parents to come in? Sometimes it's not always about what the kid wants. It's also like, hey, how do the parents factor in? And that's not throwing any shade or water at the parents. It's more like, that's a fair question, right? Like, hey, if I'm sending my kid all the way out from Ohio to the state of Washington, am I going to be able to see him? How's that communication? All that sort of stuff, which, you would assume those questions are probably answered by now, but there's always logistical hurdles and stuff like that. But the point of what I'm getting at is there's no, even with Kirk, he hasn't been an issue, right? He's taken visits, but he's maintained his commitment to Washington, right? He hasn't been, I'm going to back off. Oh, no, I'm back in. No, I'm back out. No, I'm back in. It's like, no, he's stayed strong. Yeah, he's taken visits, but UCLA made a push for Peyton Waters. He said no, but it's a different circumstance, right? But there's always going to be schools that want to get these kids on campus. And also to the point, that means Kalen DeBoer is doing something right with the guys that he's going after. If other schools like Ohio State, Michigan State, big power programs want their same players.
Right. No, you make a really great point there. And then something I want to expand on, especially when you talk about just the personality aspect, where he kept saying these kids have great support systems. They have great families, all that, where it definitely, I'm sure some fans will make an OKG joke in there somewhere, but this staff has gone through extreme lengths to make sure that they're vetting these kids and bringing in the right people. Well, Kalen DeBoer has talked about that so many different times in so many different ways with so many different aspects of this program. Does it sound like I'm repeating myself? Yeah, but look at what he's done with this team. And it goes so far beyond just what you're seeing on the field, because he understands how to build a culture and how to build a staff off the field too, to make sure that all these things are in place. And I'm going to just be very blunt about this. Oregon fans can say whatever they want to about their recruiting class, because this is something that you're going to see all over Twitter. Oh, this is a top 5 recruiting class. Look at this. Look at this. Washington's recruiting class is just as good. They just aren't rated in the same light for whatever reason. But if you watch the film of all these guys, they are on the same level. Like I said, I was going to talk about Rachimana Bulabulavu, because that's just been my guy from day one, from the second I watched this film in this class, where you watch that kid's film and you say, why is this kid an unranked 3-star? And then it took him until the day before signing day to get his 4th star. Noah Carter, when he committed, was a borderline 4-star. Now he's a top 100 kid. You saw DeMarcy Davis, same thing. 3-star kid when he commits, got the bump. And then there are other ones where they didn't even get the bump. Like the one that really stands out to me the most is Justice Williams, who you and I have talked about at length this week, where it's the same thing, where do stars matter in a certain sense? Yes, absolutely. Look at what Alabama's doing. They do that because they hit a 90% blue chip ratio. Shout out to Christian Cable, had a fantastic article about that the other day. Go subscribe to our friend of the pod over on Montlake too. Where is that important? Yeah, absolutely. But when you look at the way this staff evaluates talent, and through 2 years has been able to develop that talent, I have no questions about what they're going to be able to do with these guys for the next 3 to 4 years.
Right. Well, and the other point too about your point about Oregon, which is valid, because look at the number of guys. So if they're signing, let's say 30 guys, right? 25, 30 sure. guys. Washington's only signing 15. How many of that 30 for Oregon is going to end up hitting the portal? We saw a number of guys like, oh, this so-and-so former 4-star freshman running back is transferring out of Oregon. It's like, well, yeah, Oregon's got 3 or 4 running backs, but if all these guys want to play, they probably all should play. That's kind of why Washington isn't a school that hogs the talent. They know who they want, they target them, and they go get them. You're not seeing Washington say, hey, we're going to take 7 receivers. Just, we're going to go after Jeremiah Smith. We're going to go after this. We're going to go after that. It's like, no, we're just going to go after the guys that we know we can get, that we know we want, and we know we can coach and then develop here at Washington. That's not to say that they wouldn't want Jeremiah Smith, right? But it's like, okay, like you're not going to hog all the talent, right? You're not taking a Chris Brownsville and an Aaron Butler and a Tobias Merriweather and a this and a that and just saying, hey, you know what, we'll figure out the stuff later on. But if we can keep them on our roster for one whole year, that means they're not on somebody else's roster. It's like, no, it's not the way to coach and develop a roster. So the fact that Kalen is knowing who he's getting, it's like, yeah, 15 is low, but it's like you'd rather have 15 than 10 or 5, but also same thing can be said for 25 or 30 because most of those guys then probably are not going to end up sticking around the program to develop, and you're just wasting resources.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's something where it also speaks to the culture of the roster of what he wants to build. He knows that he wants kids who are fully bought into this program. And it comes down to that same thing we just talked about, the vetting process and going to such extreme lengths to recruit these kids. And I think that we're going to see a major jump in not only, this is something you and I have talked about before. And like he said that the 25, we've seen a lot of things saying 2025 is going to be a bigger class in terms of guys that are going to be leaving and everything else that's going on with that. And we're probably going to see more higher ranked kids too. Like we've heard that they're in on some of the bigger name prospects as well. And they're going through that same process with these guys. And now that they've established themselves and said, here, this is what we're doing, we can develop anybody in that same light. That's where the stars do matter come in, but it's because it's still the same process though.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I couldn't have said it better myself. It's like, and that's the whole point, is to where you're taking the guys that we're not going to pull out. So that third year in your program, when you're actually building your class through the high school ranks, as DeBoer said, because he even admitted, like, building your roster through the portal is not sustainable. Like, you have to be able to recruit out of the high school ranks. And yes, I've gotten Penix and Dylan Johnson and now Will Rogers. It's like, but we also got Austin Mack. Now we got DeMarcius Davis. So it's like we're still getting high school guys to develop while we bring in a transfer to bridge the gap, because we're not going to shoot the program in the foot by saying, hey, you know what, let's just roll out Austin Mack, even if he's like ready or not, just so we don't have to take another transfer. It's like, no, if you can take a 1-year transfer, do it. Austin Mack will understand. Also being 17, turning 18, it's not the worst thing in the world for him to not start until he's 19.
No, you're absolutely right there. And we're going to keep moving right along here, because we're going to do a little bit of a power hour style again, because we did it for the high schoolers on the Thursday show. Now we're going to do it for the 4 transfers who have signed. And that will come right after a message from our friends over at FanDuel, because as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. And just a quick reminder to everybody, all the everydayers out there, that Washington still 4.5-point underdog on FanDuel. So if you're going to be in Louisiana, might want to put a couple bucks down on that. I would definitely recommend that. All right, Lars, are you ready for another power hour? Because we had some fun with this one yesterday, and now we've got only 4 guys to talk about. So we still are going to move along kind of quickly with these, but let's start with linebacker Ethan Barr, who's transferring in from Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, first of all, we touched on it initially when he announced his commitment, that, same thing kind of with the quarterback, right? Where you don't want to have Devin Bryant and, obviously Carson Bruno is probably going to be your starter next season, or one of your main starters with Alfonso Chuputala. But with the amount of rotation that Washington has at linebacker, you kind of need, another Edifon Olufosio, another Raylan Goforth, somebody that can be a veteran in that room, that's had SEC experience, that can kind of match the level of play when Carson or Chuputala comes out, right? Because
sure.
And also, and again, with injuries that can happen, you want to always have veteran depth at that position. You don't want to just be looking at Drew Fowler and saying, okay, well, now Drew Fowler's a third linebacker. It's like, okay, not the Drew Fowler
freshman and Devin Bryant and Jordan Whitney as well.
Right, exactly. And so and that's the thing, is like, and it's not a negative for Jordan Whitney and Devin Bryant, but because it's almost like, well, Ethan Barr, as a veteran transfer who's been on a terrible Vanderbilt team the past couple of years and is a 2-time captain, he's just getting to play better football. So it's like, hey, I'm going to go out to the Big Ten. It's crazy. Out to Washington in the Big, right? Going out to Washington, playing in the Big Ten, where it's like, okay, I'm going to play high-level football. I'm probably going to get a decent amount of playing time. Whether I start or not, so be it. But there's enough competition in that room where I can come in, I'll have a chance to compete, maybe play on special teams as well. And that's the whole point about, you're getting impact transfers, right? Guys that, hey, he's going to be a contributor on special teams and in the 2 deeps. Okay. You don't need a guaranteed, day one starter because you got Carson Bruder. So you don't need a guaranteed A1, but getting a 2-time captain, I think, will also help Carson and kind of the rest of that room offset the loss of Eddie, especially because Eddie's, being a multi-year captain, or was a captain this year.
Yeah.
And, just the impact that he had on the program, the veteran presence that he brought, you want another guy like that. And I'm assuming that had to play a lot of why Ethan Barr was the guy for Washington in that position.
No, you're 100% right. I like you said a little bit ago, I couldn't have said it any better myself. So I'm going to move right along here, and because I really want to talk quarterback. So I'm going to start with Will Rogers here. Just I'm so impressed with his film and everything that he was able to do. Like under Mike Leach's air raid system, yeah, he took a step back this year, got hurt at Mississippi State, but that was also with a big change in the offense. And I've seen some things saying, oh, well, will he succeed outside of the air raid? And I absolutely think he can. And the number one thing, and I'm sure you and I talked about this on the live show after his commitment, where with this staff, when it comes to their coaching, evaluation, and just whatever it is that they want in a quarterback, I feel that even after just 2 years, they should have earned everybody's complete trust in that. Because I talked about this on my guy Big Ten Ted's show on Wednesday, where he said, well, like, tell me a little bit about DeMarcius Davis. So, we went through his whole analysis. And I said the same thing, where we look at Aiden Childs, who was an early target of the staff, Avery Johnson, another early target of the staff. And now we look at the guys in the transfer portal, right? Will Rogers, Michael Penix, of course. We saw what they were able to do with Dylan Morris when in the mop-up duty that we saw him in, where he looked very different under the system. And Austin Mack, again, same thing, where DeBoer just raved about Austin Mack at his press conference, where it's the same thing of they're doing such a good job of developing quarterbacks as it is. So whatever it is that they see and they've identified with Will Rogers, I feel that the coaching staff has earned complete trust with that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing is there's not really been a drop off. And it's also been good that they're doing thorough evaluations. I mean, they took EJ Cam and Landon Bell as early commits, but then, when those guys realize like, hey, maybe I want to go elsewhere, and Washington's like, okay, well, you're probably not going to play for a couple of years here. Like maybe you might almost be like Dylan Morris, right? Where you get here a couple of years later, you might get a chance to start, but we're going to keep bringing in transfers. And it's like, okay, so you're doing the right evaluation, right? You're not just dropping the kids, but you're kind of just making the correct calls at the correct time. Because They could easily just settle and said, hey, we're going to take EJ Cam we'll call it a day. We don't need to get DeMarcius. We, can use our resources elsewhere. And I mean, it's the same thing in 25, right? Where you're looking at, you get Jackson Collick early, right? But you're still looking at Hassan Longstreet. You're still looking at other guys just in case, where it's like, hey, in case other schools start, offering Collick, right? Who's a good quarterback in his own right. You're being prepared and you're not missing a step along the way. And I think that eloquently ties in together with your point of like, look, this staff deserves the benefit of the doubt. They know what they're doing. And again, it's not an exact science. So if they miss on a guy, okay, they missed on a guy. But
sure.
It also goes both ways, right? Where you can say they took, it's like when Washington took Savell Smalls. Well, then that didn't work out, and then goes to Colorado and it didn't work out there either. So is that Washington's failure, or is it just maybe a style scheme fit and some guys just don't end up panning out? That's not a shot at Savell or EJ Cam, right? It's like sometimes you just got to go where you got to go, right? That's just kind of how the chips fall.
No, I agree with you. All right. So as we start to wrap up here, I'm going to give you your choice between Sebastian Valdez and Drew Azzopardi. 60 seconds. You'll do 60 seconds on one. I'll do 60 on the other.
I'll do Drew.
Okay. Go for it.
So that's the guy that really, to me, really ties everything together with this transfer class, right? Because he's a multi-year guy. You're getting, like I said, for at least 2 years, potentially 3 years. But if he works out, especially being a right tackle and knowing, similar to with Aaron Butler, where it's like, hey, these guys are probably going to go, so we need a guy right away. just in case, right? If Sam Peacock happens to beat him out in camp, so be it. Maybe the competition rises and brings guys out of him. But to get a 6'7", 6'8" guy like that with veteran starting experience and still multiple years of eligibility, you can't miss on those guys. And so that to me is why he's such a valuable piece. It's not just a one-off transfer.
No, I agree. That's the biggest thing, like especially at that position where you want stalwarts year in and year out, where you can have a guy for a couple of years. Look at Troy Fautano and Roger Rosengard. Perfect example. I like that a lot. Then Sebastian Valdez, 6'3", 284. I like his film a lot. Something that I've just made the point about where they're talking NFL draft, talking recruiting, talking anything is, and it's obvious, right? A good interior pass rusher can completely wreck a game. See BJ Green. He still hasn't signed. That's why we're not talking about him. But it's the same exact thing where even though he might not necessarily be, a big 320-pound run stuffer, I feel like those bodies can be a little bit easier to scout and recruit. Whereas somebody who can truly get pressure on the quarterback is a lot harder to find. And that's one thing that you see in Valdez. As you said, after his commitment, 9 sacks last season. He just, the way he can get after the quarterback is really impressive. I really like his arsenal of pass rush moves. Like the more I watch his film, the more I'm like, oh yeah, oh no, I can see this, I can see that. And the fact that he got a 4-star transfer rating from 247 Sports, I think is really nice and just kind of speaks to his production over the last couple of years. And this is just a really good get for a team that we're expecting to lose, not just MJ Ale and Tuli Gasanoa, but I know both you and I are expecting Jacob Bandes to probably grad transfer, just based on some comments that he's made. So getting a guy like Sebastian Valdez in the room, even though it's just for 1 year, is going to help bridge the gap to the guys we talked about earlier in this episode.
Yep, I think that you hit the nail on the head. It's like you don't want to have those gap years because those gap years, when you're especially coming off a national championship potentially, look at Georgia, right? You're talking about staying power. People have asked me, and I'm sure they've asked you a bunch of times on different shows, does Washington have staying power? Does Kalen DeBoer have stay? Is this sustainable? Or is this Michael Penix and then when he gets anybody else, it's going to fall off? It's like, no, on both sides of the ball, there's staying power. So it's just a matter of can you continue on and not have that much of a gap, and how you do that, get veteran guys in with 1 year of eligibility to say, hey, you know what? You've been good somewhere else. How about you come be great here?
Right. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. Check out on Twitter, we are currently looking for a mailbag for our Monday show. And if that's going to be a full mailbag episode. Tuesday, we're probably going to do a little bit more if we can't get to all the questions that day. So make sure you check all that out. Follow us on Twitter and make sure, again, wherever you get the show, you subscribe there as well, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We are everywhere. We are updating this channel with new content every single day. Make sure you keep up in tune with us through the Sugar Bowl, through everything else. We are going to be making sure that we bring you the best Husky content we possibly can every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, make sure you like, subscribe, give us the show a 5-star review for audio only, and leave a comment down below if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Monday.